Claire Bennett never expected to lock eyes with her ex-husband, Nathan Hale, again, especially not at a glittering gala where he parades his glamorous new fiancée, Vivian Carter. But Nathan is in for a shock, because the man by Claire's side? That's Julian Cross, quiet, charming, and secretly one of the most powerful billionaires in the country. What starts as an awkward run-in quickly spirals into a high-society showdown of ego, envy, and unexpected twists. Secrets will explode, loyalties will be tested. And Claire? She's about to show everyone that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's luxurious. Buckle up for a story of heartbreak, scandal, and a comeback that no one saw coming. Rain battered the windows of the small cafe on West 45th Street as Claire Bennett sipped her cappuccino. It was an unseasonably cold afternoon in mid-June, and the cafe, called Till's Brew, bustled with customers seeking refuge from the downpour. Claire, dressed in a simple navy blue blouse and jeans, felt a strange mix of tranquility and lingering anxiety. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined sitting here, at peace with herself, after the emotional storm that had been her divorce. Her mind slipped back to the day she and Nathan had signed the final documents. There'd been anger, regrets, and tears enough to fill an ocean. They'd begun their marriage as starry-eyed college sweethearts who believed love was enough to conquer the world. But over time, Nathan's ambition had soured into ruthless competition, and Claire's dreams of a supportive partner had crumbled under constant criticism. They argued about money, lifestyles, the future. Finally, the cracks became chasms. A blaring horn outside jolted her from her thoughts. She checked her phone for messages. Julian Cross, a man she'd begun seeing 2 months ago, had promised he'd join her after his meeting. They were supposed to head to an art gallery event afterward, hosted by her dear friend, Lena Park, an up-and-coming curator. Claire felt that old, self-protective voice inside, reminding her not to hope too much. Yet Julian had never given her a reason to doubt him. He was gentle, respectful, and strangely humble for a man whose gestures of generosity often left her speechless. At that exact moment, the bell over the cafe door jingled. Claire looked up, expecting to see Julian. Instead, her heart almost stopped. Nathan Hale stepped inside, shaking off his umbrella. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still confident, still with the faintest hint of arrogance in how he scanned the room. Her gut tightened, an old ache flared. She considered ducking behind her coffee cup, but it was too late. He'd spotted her. "Claire," he said, approaching her table with cautious curiosity. "Wow, long time no see." Nathan wore a charcoal suit that probably cost as much as a month's rent in Midtown. His hair, once boyish and unruly, was now impeccably styled. He looked every bit the corporate success he'd aimed to be. Nathan glanced at the seat across from her. Without waiting for an invitation, he sat down, ignoring the line of customers behind him. Typical Nathan. He always had to be the center of attention. "Yes, indeed. It's been a while," Claire said, trying to keep her voice even. Despite her attempts at calm, her hands trembled slightly, and she placed her coffee cup back on its saucer to steady herself. It was surreal to face him again in such a random moment. She briefly wondered how life had been treating him. For an instant, she recalled the vicious arguments that had escalated to their parting. Accusations about who contributed more financially, who was more supportive, who sacrificed more. She took a measured breath, determined not to let those memories ruin her newfound sense of self. "You look well," Nathan continued. "I heard you moved back downtown. How have you been?" He tried to smile, but it came off a bit forced. They were no longer the same people who'd once shared a home and a bed. "I'm doing fine," Claire replied. "Just taking things a day at a time, and you? Busy as ever?" "I was just meeting a client nearby." He paused, drumming his fingers on the table. "Listen, I know things ended on a bad note." Claire braced for him to bring up the past or deliver some harsh critique. Instead, he cleared his throat and picked up a napkin, wiping a non-existent spill from the table, stalling. Nathan might have had a slight twinge of guilt. She could see it in his shifting eyes. "But I do hope you're all right," he finished. "I am," she said softly. She wasn't sure if that was 100% truth or if she just wanted to believe it. "Really, I'm okay." That was when the cafe door swung open again, letting in another gust of wind and drizzle. Claire's heart soared. Julian stepped in, scanning the room, tall and elegant in a tailored navy blazer and matching slacks. He spotted Claire, and a warm smile lit his face. Nathan followed her gaze, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Claire." "Hey," Julian said, walking over with a certain quiet confidence. "Sorry, I'm late. The meeting ran over." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and leaned down to give her a soft kiss on the cheek. Nathan arched an eyebrow. "So, this is?" Claire felt a momentary pang of awkwardness. "Nathan, this is Julian Cross, my boyfriend. Julian, this is Nathan Hale, my ex-husband." The tension that settled over the table was almost palpable. Julian's expression remained gracious. He extended a hand to Nathan, who shook it somewhat stiffly. "Nice to meet you," Julian said, maintaining his composure. "Likewise," Nathan offered. He sounded more polite than he looked. His eyes flickered over Julian, sizing him up the way one might assess a competitor. "Well, I'd better get going. I have to pick up Vivian soon." Claire felt a sudden jolt at the name Vivian. She vaguely recalled Nathan mentioning a co-worker by that name during their last year of marriage, a co-worker he seemed to admire excessively. Or maybe that was her insecurities talking. Either way, the mention of her name replaced any sadness with a simmering annoyance. Nathan was engaged, apparently. She quickly schooled her face to remain neutral. "Nice bumping into you, Claire," Nathan continued. He nodded at Julian. "And it was nice to meet you, Mr. Cross. Maybe we'll cross paths again sometime." Julian gave a polite smile. "Perhaps. Take care." With that, Nathan slipped out of the cafe, leaving behind the faint smell of expensive cologne and a swirl of unanswered questions. Julian pulled out a chair and sat down, placing a careful hand on Claire's. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Claire forced a smile, determined not to let the chance encounter rattle her. "I'm okay," she murmured. "Just surprising, that's all." He squeezed her hand gently. "If he ever bothers you, or if you need space, just let me know. I can handle it." "No, it's fine," she interrupted. "I'm over him. At least I think I am." She sighed, thinking about how Nathan's presence still made her chest tighten. "Let's just go to the gallery show. Lena's expecting us." Julian nodded and stood, helping Claire with her coat like a perfect gentleman. As they stepped back into the rainy street, Claire realized Nathan had left her with a million conflicting thoughts swirling inside. Little did she know, this chance encounter was only the beginning of a tangled web about to unfold, a web that would pit old resentments against new hopes and reveal secrets so shocking that no one involved could possibly emerge unchanged. 2 days later, Claire found herself in a sunlit corner of her apartment, sifting through old photograph albums she'd stuffed in a storage box after the divorce. Why she'd chosen this exact moment to revisit old memories, she couldn't fully explain. Perhaps seeing Nathan had triggered a wave of nostalgia, good, bad, and everything in between. Her phone chimed. It was Lena Park, texting, "Did you see the article in the Post about Nathan's upcoming engagement party? Heard they're going huge. Like, get your name in the society pages huge. You okay?" Claire frowned. She typed back quickly. "I'm fine, just a bit surprised. We ran into each other yesterday." Lena replied with a barrage of shocked emojis, followed by, He's flaunting Vivian big time. She's apparently from an influential family. Rumor is they're hosting an over-the-top event next month. If you need moral support, you know I'm here." Claire exhaled deeply. So that was it. Nathan, always obsessed with status, was announcing his new engagement with fanfare. Deep inside, a flicker of hurt flared. They had once talked about a modest wedding vow renewal when they'd reached their 10-year anniversary, just a private event with close friends. Now that dream was worthless, overshadowed by his grand spectacle. Glancing back at the photos, she came across one from their college days. Nathan, all messy hair and bright eyes, hugging her tight in front of their campus dorm. The memory of that young, hopeful couple made her chest ache. How had it all gone so terribly wrong? She set the photo aside, determined not to let her emotions spiral. Her life had changed since the divorce. She had her own brand-new architecture studio to manage, Morgan Designs, ironically keeping the surname because her business had been registered under that name prior to the split. She'd built a modest but growing clientele. And then there was Julian, who'd appeared in her life like a breath of fresh air. She thought of Julian's warm smile and gentle manner. They met at a charity gala Lena had invited her to months ago. He'd been there under the radar, introduced as a philanthropic donor to various social causes. The two had hit it off, discussing art, architecture, and travel. She'd only learned the barest hints about his actual wealth and inheritance from his late grandfather, some partial ownership in a tech conglomerate, because Julian rarely discussed finances. When he'd asked her out on a date, she'd hesitated, uncertain if she was ready. But something about Julian inspired trust. They'd been quietly building a relationship ever since. Her phone pinged again, pulling her from her reverie. This time, it was a message from Julian himself. "Early dinner tonight? Or I can swing by your studio and we can grab drinks after." Claire smiled at the screen. A sense of gratitude washed over her. She sent a reply. "Dinner sounds perfect. I'm about to head to the studio for a few hours, but I'll be free by 6. See you then." She returned the photograph albums to their dusty box and tucked them away in a closet, hoping she could do the same with the emotional baggage they carried. Nathan and Vivian's big engagement party would no doubt become gossip fodder. Claire just had to keep moving forward with her own life, reminding herself that the past was the past. Yet deep down, she couldn't shake a strange feeling that her paths with Nathan weren't done crossing, and that the ex-husband she thought she'd left behind might come roaring back into her life, pulling trouble along with him. The chime above the elegant French bistro's door jingled as Julian guided Claire in, a hand lightly placed at the small of her back. La Papillon was an upscale place on the Upper East Side, famous for its layered soufflé and impeccable wine list. Soft jazz music and warm light from vintage chandeliers welcomed them. The maitre d' recognized Julian immediately and led them to a private corner table, away from prying eyes. Claire settled into her seat, scanning the table setting of gleaming silverware and crisp white linens. She noticed other couples at nearby tables, some of them glancing in Julian's direction, as though they recognized him, or at least suspected he was someone important. It was something she'd grown used to. Whenever they went out, there always seemed to be a hint of speculation in people's stares. Julian handled it with polite indifference, never revealing more than necessary. "I've taken the liberty of ordering a bottle of your favorite red," Julian told her, his smile lighting up his face. "I thought we could celebrate your new design contract." Claire's lips curved upward. Earlier that day, she'd signed a major contract with a boutique hotel chain, something that could catapult her architecture studio into the next league. They'd found her work on social media and reached out after seeing her portfolio. "That's so thoughtful," she said. "I still can't believe they chose me." Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "You deserve every success. Congratulations." A sommelier approached with the wine, pouring them each a glass. They toasted quietly, the soft clink of crystal echoing in the intimate space. Claire took a sip, the velvety texture of the wine warming her throat. They exchanged news about their day. Julian mentioned an upcoming trip to London for a philanthropic conference, carefully avoiding too many details of his financial dealings. Claire spoke excitedly about the upcoming designs she was conceptualizing for the hotel chain. Halfway through the meal, a sumptuous coq au vin for her and a seared salmon for him. Julian cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, glancing down at his plate as though rehearsing his words, "about introducing you to some people in my circle. You know, friends, business associates. I just want them to know about the amazing woman I'm with." Claire paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "You do?" she asked, heart fluttering. They had been dating for a couple of months, but she still felt they were in a delicate stage. Meeting people in his circle sounded potentially overwhelming, given that Julian's circle was likely full of high-powered individuals. He nodded, setting down his napkin. "I don't want to push you into anything, but there's a fundraiser next week. I'd like you by my side, if that's okay." A swirl of emotions tugged at her. Excitement, curiosity, a bit of fear. "Of course," she replied softly. "I'd be honored." Julian's face lit up. He reached for her hand again, rubbing his thumb gently over her knuckles. "Thank you. I'm really happy to have you in my life, Claire." They lingered over dessert, an exquisite flourless chocolate torte, and spoke about simpler things. Favorite books, childhood memories, future travel plans. Claire found herself drifting in the warmth of possibility, letting go of the dark corners of her past. Nathan's name hovered unspoken between them, but she felt no need to bring him up tonight. This was her time with Julian, a space free of regrets. By the time they finished, the bistro was closing. They stepped out into the crisp night air. "I'll drive you home," Julian said, leading her to a sleek black sedan waiting at the curb. She recalled the first time he'd shown up with a driver. She'd insisted on taking a cab to meet him because it seemed too extravagant to arrive in a chauffeured car. Over time, she'd grown more comfortable, though she still insisted on paying her own way whenever possible. Inside the car, Julian's arm draped around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, relaxed. She closed her eyes, letting the glow of streetlights flash across the windows as they wound through the city. The hum of the engine lulled her into a peaceful reverie. In that moment, she dared to believe that her life could move forward, unburdened by the heartbreak that once consumed her. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Claire's architecture studio. She sat at her drafting table, carefully finalizing sketches for the boutique hotel project. Pencil lines grew into elegant curves and arches, capturing her vision for a modern yet cozy interior. The desk phone rang, startling her from her focused zone. "Claire Bennett, Morgan Designs," she answered, tucking the pencil behind her ear. "Claire, it's me!" came her friend's excited voice. "You're not going to believe this. I just heard from a colleague at the New York Chronicle that Nathan and Vivian are hosting an engagement soiree at the Four Seasons next week. And guess what else? They're apparently inviting everyone from your old social circle, friends, acquaintances, even some of your mutual clients." Claire's stomach flipped. Why on earth would they invite me, though? That's the thing. Word is, Nathan doesn't want you there. But Vivian apparently insisted. She told the Chronicle she wants a harmonious future. Or maybe she's just trying to show off. Lena paused. "I know you probably don't care anymore, but I think it might be important for you to be aware, just in case an invitation shows up." Claire exhaled slowly. She hadn't thought Nathan's engagement would swirl so publicly, but given his thirst for social status, it wasn't surprising. "Thanks for letting me know, Lena," Claire said. "If I get invited, I'll think carefully before responding." "Just remember, you don't owe them anything," Lena added. "By the way, how's Julian?" At the mention of Julian, Claire's lips curved. "He's good. He wants to introduce me to his circle at some fancy fundraiser." Actually, that's also next week. I have a feeling my schedule's about to get hectic. Lena laughed. Better you than me. I'm thrilled for you, though. If you need a +1 to Nathan's fiasco or a bodyguard, I'm here. They hung up, and Claire stared at the phone for a moment. She was certain that Nathan's engagement party would be a glittering spectacle of high society and corporate elites. Vivian Carter, Claire now remembered, came from old money in Boston. She'd been rumored to be a shrewd corporate lawyer. Nathan probably saw her as both a romantic and strategic match. That afternoon, a delivery courier brought a large, cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. Claire felt her pulse spike. The return address read, Mr. Nathan Hale and Miss Vivian Carter. She sighed. So the rumor was true. They really had invited her. Inside, the invitation was thick and glossy, detailing the upcoming soiree at the Four Seasons. Claire folded it back into the envelope, uncertain whether to toss it in the trash or stash it away. Part of her thought it was a power move by Vivian, an attempt to appear gracious or to rub Claire's nose in their new status. Later that evening, as she unwound at home, Claire mulled over the invitation. She'd share it with Julian and see what he thought. Maybe they could skip it altogether. She had no desire to watch Nathan flaunt his fiancée. Then again, a small voice inside her whispered that it might be cathartic to walk in with her own date, someone who truly valued her, and show them she wasn't the broken woman Nathan had left behind. She pulled out her phone and called Julian. He picked up on the second ring. Claire, hey, I was just thinking of you. Well, I've just received something interesting, Claire said, her voice tinged with irony. An invitation to Nathan's engagement soiree. Julian paused. How are you feeling about that? She curled up on her couch, hugging a throw pillow, conflicted. Part of me doesn't want to go, but another part of me. I'm curious. Maybe I want closure, or maybe I just want to show that I'm okay. Also, Vivian specifically invited me. It feels like a trap, but maybe I'm overthinking it. Julian's tone was gentle. I'll support whatever you decide. If you want me by your side, just say the word. If you don't want to go, we can do something else. Somewhere far away from that spectacle. Claire's tension eased at his understanding. I'll think about it, she said. In the meantime, we still have your fundraiser next week. I'll focus on that for now. Little did Claire know, the upcoming events would collide in ways she couldn't predict. The worlds of Nathan, Vivian, and Julian were on a collision course, and when they finally met, the fallout would be unlike anything Claire had ever experienced. The following week arrived in a flurry of nerves and excitement. Claire stood in front of the mirror in Julian's penthouse, an expansive modern space overlooking Central Park. She wore an elegant emerald green evening gown that highlighted her figure. Lena had come over earlier to help style her hair into a loose chignon. Now, her reflection exuded a quiet confidence she wasn't entirely sure she felt. Julian, adjusting his cufflinks, stepped up beside her. You look breathtaking, he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be, Claire said, managing a small smile. I still don't know who all will be there. Julian hesitated for a moment. It's going to be a mix of philanthropists, investors, and a few celebrities who champion various causes. These events can get a bit overwhelming, so if at any point you want to leave, just let me know. They arrived at the grand ballroom of the Laurelwood Hotel, greeted by flashing cameras and a flurry of wealthy donors stepping out of sleek cars. Claire stayed close to Julian, feeling a flood of relief when they finally passed through the entrance and into the elegantly decorated hall. Chandeliers glittered overhead, and servers circulated with champagne flutes. Almost immediately, a striking woman with auburn hair rushed forward. "Julian, darling," she cooed, air-kissing both of his cheeks. "So good to see you. And who is this stunning lady?" Julian placed a hand at Claire's back. "Celeste, meet Claire Bennett, my girlfriend. Claire, this is Celeste Ramos, a board member of the Global Arts Foundation. Celeste's eyes lit up. Pleasure to meet you, my dear. Julian's told me you're an architect. How wonderful. We must chat about our new cultural center we're designing in Brooklyn. They exchanged pleasantries, Claire feeling slightly dazed by Celeste's enthusiasm. As more people drifted over, the conversations followed a similar pattern: polite greetings, mild curiosity about Claire's background, then pivoting to philanthropic or business interests. She quickly realized that many of these people moved in orbits of unimaginable wealth, forging alliances through donations and social events. Midway through the evening, she stepped away to admire a display featuring the foundation's accomplishments. Photos of hospitals built in rural regions, art scholarships awarded, and environmental restoration projects. She was quietly reading a plaque about a conservation effort in Africa when a voice startled her from behind. "Claire Bennett? Is that you?" The voice was male, vaguely familiar. She turned to see Bryce Langdon, an old acquaintance of Nathan's, and a man with whom Nathan had once discussed real estate ventures. Bryce's eyes widened in recognition. "I almost didn't believe it. How are you?" Claire forced a polite smile. "I'm well, Bryce. Didn't expect to see you here." "I'm a sponsor," he replied, swirling the wine in his glass. "Always good for business to donate to worthy causes, right?" He gave a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Actually, I've got a table next to, Nathan Hale at the upcoming engagement event. You planning to attend?" Claire felt her posture stiffen. "Still deciding," she said carefully. Bryce let out a low chuckle. "You should go. Nathan's been bragging nonstop about his new fiancée. Something about her father's connections in D.C. He's definitely on a roll. You might want to see what you're missing." A flash of annoyance rippled through her. "Trust me, I'm not missing anything. Besides, I'm here with someone else," she said, glancing around for Julian, hoping to end this uncomfortable conversation. Bryce caught the hint. "All right, I'll let you go. Take care, Claire." He ambled off, glass of wine in hand, leaving her with a bitter taste of the past. She exhaled, leaning against the display. Suddenly, a warm palm touched her shoulder. She turned to see Julian, concern in his gaze. "Everything all right?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, just someone from my old life. Let's go get some air." He nodded, guiding her out to a terrace overlooking the city skyline. Cool evening air brushed her cheeks. She closed her eyes, feeling Julian's presence behind her. "Claire," he said quietly, "I know running into people from your past can stir up unwelcome memories, but I hope you know I'm here for you." She turned to face him, tears threatening to form. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm fine. It's just that my ex-husband's engagement party is days away, and I guess I'm still dealing with how he used to undermine me. I don't want to be that woman who can't let go." Julian brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're not that woman. But if you decide you need to go to that engagement event for closure, I'll come with you." A small spark of gratitude flickered in her chest. "I appreciate that," she said, stepping closer to rest her head on his shoulder. High above the city, under the glow of skyscraper lights, Claire began to sense that events were swirling in a direction she could not fully predict. Something told her that Nathan's lavish celebration would be more than just an engagement party. Secrets were stirring, some of which might change everything she believed about her past and her future. The Four Seasons Hotel shimmered with opulence as Claire arrived hand in hand with Julian. She'd decided, after much thought, that attending Nathan's engagement soiree was a necessary step to fully close the chapter on her former marriage. Julian, in a sleek black tux, was a fortress of calm beside her. Claire wore a midnight blue gown that contrasted beautifully with her dark hair, and she felt a surge of confidence she wished she'd possessed years ago. A red carpet lined the entrance, where paparazzi snapped photos of notable guests, many of them CEOs, politicians, and socialites. As they stepped inside, a lavish floral arrangement dominated the foyer, and classical music floated from a string quartet in the ballroom. Waiters glided through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Within minutes, Nathan appeared. He looked sharp in a tailored suit, his expression tinged with surprise as he caught sight of Claire and Julian. Nathan's fiancée, Vivian, stood at his side, an ethereal figure in a shimmering silver gown, her auburn hair styled into an elegant updo. Vivian's eyes flickered with interest as she recognized Claire. "Claire," Vivian greeted with a cordial smile, extending a hand. "I'm so glad you could make it. Nathan mentioned he ran into you not long ago." Claire shook her hand, noticing the massive diamond on Vivian's ring finger. She plastered on her own polite smile. "Thank you for inviting me." Nathan cleared his throat. "Julian," he said, nodding in acknowledgement. "Nice to see you again," Julian responded with a quiet courtesy. "Likewise. Congratulations on your engagement." A somewhat awkward pause followed, broken when Vivian touched Nathan's arm and excused them to greet other guests. Claire exhaled. She cast Julian a grateful look. "Well, that wasn't too bad," she whispered. Though her pulse was still racing, they made their way deeper into the ballroom, sampling canapés and greeting a few acquaintances. Lena was there with her boyfriend, waving Claire over to a corner. They chatted for a while, Lena slipping in witty remarks about Nathan's pretentious decor choices. Even so, an undercurrent of tension wove through the evening. As they watched from afar, Nathan and Vivian commanded the crowd. Vivian seemed perfectly poised, a glimmer of sophistication in every gesture. Nathan, for his part, looked proud, almost smug, as he introduced Vivian to key figures in the room. It was a spectacle of social maneuvering that made Claire's head spin. Partway through the night, a hush fell over the ballroom. Nathan tapped a microphone. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice echoing. "Vivian and I want to thank you for joining us to celebrate our engagement. We're thrilled to share our happiness with all of you." Polite applause rippled across the room. Vivian took the mic with a gracious smile. "I couldn't be more grateful to have Nathan by my side. We look forward to many more milestones together, and we're touched to have our friends and family supporting us tonight. Thank you." Another round of applause. Nathan handed the mic to the band, which struck up a lively tune. People resumed chatting as waiters delivered fresh champagne. Julian turned to Claire. "You've handled yourself like a queen," he whispered. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I think this is enough closure for me. Maybe we can slip out soon." Then, from behind them, a voice sneered. "Slipping out so soon? You haven't even congratulated the happy couple properly." It was Nathan's mother, Margaret Hale, a woman with a penchant for wearing pearls and disapproval. She'd always liked Claire at first, until the divorce, when she'd apparently decided Claire was at fault. "Hello, Margaret," Claire said, keeping her tone steady. Margaret eyed Julian up and down. "And who is this gentleman?" Before Claire could speak, Julian smiled politely. "My name is Julian Cross, ma'am. I'm here with Claire." Margaret's gaze narrowed, as if calculating net worth by sight alone. "You look familiar. Have we met somewhere before?" Julian's calm exterior betrayed no discomfort. "I'm not sure," he said evenly. "Perhaps at a charity gala." "That must be it," Margaret sniffed, turning her attention back to Claire. "I suppose it's good you've moved on, though some of us wonder if you'll ever truly appreciate what Nathan brought to your life." Julian's jaw tightened subtly, but he said nothing, allowing Claire to respond. She refused to shrink from Margaret's condescension. "With all due respect, I don't think that's any of your concern anymore. I wish Nathan and Vivian well." Margaret's lips thinned. "Well, do enjoy the party." She pivoted and walked away, leaving a cloud of tension in her wake. Julian placed a supportive hand on Claire's back. You all right? Fine, Claire said quietly. Let's step outside for a moment. They strolled onto a small terrace overlooking the city lights. The music and chatter from inside softened. Claire finally exhaled a long breath, releasing the pent-up tension. That woman always made me feel inadequate. Julian rubbed her shoulder soothingly. You're far from inadequate. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. A gust of wind tousled Claire's hair. She turned toward Julian, about to thank him again, when a swirl of voices from inside the ballroom caught their attention. They exchanged curious looks and stepped back in to see Nathan at the microphone once more, Vivian at his side. But this time they appeared flustered. Please, everyone, remain calm. Nathan's voice boomed through the speakers. The crowd seemed unsettled. Claire spotted a burly security guard weaving through guests, heading in her direction. Alarmed, she wondered what was happening. Excuse me, Mr. Cross, the guard said, eyes darting between Julian and Nathan on stage. Could you come with me, please? Claire's heart plunged. She gripped Julian's arm. What's going on? The guard looked uncomfortable. We received a tip that a certain guest might be here under false pretenses. A hush fell as guests turned to watch the commotion. Nathan took the mic again, his voice tight. Julian Cross, we need to verify your credentials. We can't have anyone crashing this event. A wave of disbelief rippled through Claire. She shot Nathan a glare. You invited us. Indirectly. But still. Vivian stepped up to the mic, her gaze flicking nervously between Nathan and Julian. Look, Nathan, this doesn't have to be a scene. Julian raised his hands calmly. It's all right, he said, addressing the guard. I can clarify who I am. He turned, scanning the crowd. But I'd like to know who's behind this tip. People were whispering, the rumor mill churning. Claire glared at Nathan, wondering if he orchestrated this humiliation. Nathan, for his part, looked baffled. Margaret, standing nearby, seemed smug. Suddenly, a well-dressed older man in the corner, someone Claire recognized as Vivian's father, Charles Carter, spoke up. I placed the call, he said in a clipped tone. He stepped forward, leveling Julian with a steely look. I've heard rumors about you, Mr. Cross, rumors that you claim to be wealthy, philanthropic, but no one can pinpoint the source of your fortune. We can't allow just anyone into these circles. Claire felt outrage boil in her veins. He's not just anyone. Julian gently squeezed her hand, signaling her to remain calm. He faced Charles Carter with remarkable composure. Sir, you're correct that I typically keep a low profile about my finances, but let me assure you, I'm more than capable of attending this event. If you'd like, we can step aside and verify any credentials you need. A tense standoff ensued. Nathan cleared his throat, uncertain. Vivian looked mortified by her father's outburst. The security guard hovered, awaiting instructions. Julian calmly reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. He handed it to the guard and said, If you call this number, my offices can confirm my identity. I'm a principal investor in Architect, among other ventures. A ripple of recognition swept through the crowd. Architect was a major name in the technology sector. Charles Carter paled, snatching the card from the guard to read it. Nathan's eyes flickered with confusion and perhaps envy. Vivian's father exhaled, obviously realizing he'd made a grave error in publicly confronting Julian. The guard spoke quietly into his earpiece for a moment, then nodded. It's confirmed, sir. My apologies, Mr. Cross. He stepped back, letting Julian stand unimpeded. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Julian turned toward Nathan and Vivian, keeping his voice poised. Congratulations again on your engagement. I think we'll be leaving now. With that, he took Claire's arm, leading her out. Lena trailed behind them, muttering curses under her breath at the humiliation they just endured. Outside in the lobby, Claire's emotions erupted. I can't believe they tried to throw you out like some imposter." She blinked back tears of anger. Julian's expression softened. "I've dealt with worse. Let's just go home." And as they stepped into the night, a single, undeniable fact hardened in Claire's mind. Nathan and Vivian had not only tried to embarrass her, but also Julian. The gloves were off now, and the next encounter would undoubtedly bring even more explosive revelations. The morning after the disastrous engagement soiree, social media lit up with gossip. Word had spread quickly about the confrontation at the Four Seasons. Several tabloids and society blogs carried headlines such as "Billionaire investor mistaken for party crasher" and "Fiancée's father sparks showdown at lavish engagement." Claire awoke to texts from Lena describing the fiasco's online aftermath in gleeful detail. Even Nathan had tried calling her phone late last night, leaving a voicemail that she ignored. She wasn't interested in his excuses, but curiosity drove her to play it. His voice sounded flustered. "Claire, hey, I'm sorry about what happened tonight. I had no idea Vivian's father would react that way. Look, maybe we can talk sometime soon. Clear the air. Let me know." She deleted the message, annoyance mingling with a strange satisfaction. She took solace in the fact that Julian's identity was finally out in the open. He was no longer the quiet man on the sidelines, but a formidable figure who commanded respect in elite circles. Julian, for his part, responded to the drama with characteristic calm. That morning, he invited Claire to his penthouse for breakfast. Over coffee and pastries, he broke down the entire fiasco with mild amusement. "I guess the Carters have it in their head that I'm some con artist who seduced my way into high society. It's not the first time someone's doubted my intentions." Claire frowned over the rim of her mug. "It's not fair. You have to prove yourself every time. You've done so much good with your philanthropic work." He shrugged. "Money complicates relationships. People see the fortune and either want something from me or suspect I have some hidden agenda." Reaching across the small cafe table in his living room, he brushed his thumb over her hand. "It's one reason I don't talk about it much, but I don't want you to get caught in the crossfire either." Claire shook her head, entwining her fingers with his. "I'm proud of who you are, Julian. If someone has a problem with it, that's on them." A softness flickered in his eyes, and he leaned forward to press a gentle kiss on her forehead. Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, eyebrows knitting together. "Everything okay?" Claire asked. He sighed. "It's an urgent matter with one of my companies. Something about an acquisition deal. I might need to fly to San Francisco tomorrow." Claire sat down her coffee, concern creeping in. "For how long?" "A couple of days, maybe a week. I'm not certain yet." He exhaled. "I'm sorry about the timing. I hate leaving right after all this drama." She offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, handle your business. I'll be fine." They spent the day together, strolling through the park and browse a local art exhibit, choosing to ignore the media frenzy swirling around them. Claire felt a growing sense of security in Julian's presence, as though together they could weather any storm. Yet beneath her calm, she carried a suspicion that Nathan wouldn't let this incident rest. He thrived on control and hated appearing inferior or overshadowed. Now that Julian's wealth was public knowledge, Claire suspected Nathan would feel threatened, and where Nathan felt threatened, trouble tended to follow. Her intuition wasn't wrong. Late that afternoon, just as she was about to head back to her apartment, her phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Claire, it's Vivian." The voice trembled with forced composure. "Can we meet?" I need to talk to you about Nathan." Claire's pulse quickened. Vivian? Why would she call? She half expected an ambush or a reprimand for overshadowing the engagement soiree. Yet curiosity pushed her to agree. They decided to meet at a quiet tea shop the next day. As Claire hung up, she felt an uneasy swirl in her stomach. Vivian's tone hadn't been gloating or confrontational. It had sounded almost desperate. Perhaps there were cracks in the perfect facade of Nathan and Vivian's engagement. And if so, what explosive secrets might come spilling out? The next day, a gray sky threatened rain as Claire slipped into a corner booth at Marlowe's Tea House in Midtown. The small, cozy shop was known for its extensive selection of loose-leaf teas and tranquil ambiance. Vivian arrived shortly after, wearing a simple black trench coat over a cream blouse, her posture rigid with tension. "Thank you for meeting me," Vivian said quietly, settling across from Claire. Her hands trembled slightly as she removed her coat. Claire scanned Vivian's face, noticing faint circles under her eyes. She didn't look like the radiant fiancée from the engagement party. "No problem," Claire replied. "What's going on?" A server approached, and Vivian ordered chamomile tea while Claire asked for Earl Grey. They waited in awkward silence until the server left. Vivian cleared her throat. "I know this might sound strange, but I don't have many people I can talk to about Nathan. He speaks so little of you. But I did some digging. I know how your marriage ended, abruptly and painfully." Claire's stomach clenched. "What do you want to know?" Vivian laced her fingers together. "Is he always this controlling? I've seen glimpses, like last night, how he handled the fiasco with your boyfriend. He was furious. Not because his father-in-law embarrassed Julian, but because he felt overshadowed. We had a huge fight afterwards." Claire studied Vivian's face, weighing how honest to be. She decided there was no point sugarcoating. "Nathan has a need to win," she began. "Everything in our marriage turned into a competition. It wasn't always that way. In college, he was ambitious but also kind. Over time, though, success became his obsession. He wanted me to meet impossibly high standards, and if I couldn't, he belittled me. That's when we started fighting. He never saw me as his equal. It was always about him." Vivian's eyes welled with tears. "I'm starting to see that, too. After last night, he stormed around the penthouse, shouting about how he'd be damned if he let some nobody show him up. I pointed out Julian's obviously not a nobody, and Nathan lost it." She swallowed, looking down at her hands. "I have money and connections. But Nathan wants me for more than that. He wants me to help him climb higher." Claire felt a pang of empathy. Despite her resentments, she knew how disarming Nathan's charm could be, how easy it was to get swept up in his big dreams. "So, why reach out to me?" Claire asked gently. Vivian hesitated, glancing around the tea shop as though fearing eavesdroppers. "Because I'm not sure I can go through with this engagement, and I need to know if Nathan's done anything questionable in the past, financially or otherwise. My father is pushing for the wedding, but I'm scared." Claire's thoughts drifted to the arguments about money in her marriage. Nathan had once suggested they dip into her personal savings to fund a risky business venture. When she refused, he'd called her short-sighted and unsupportive. But did he do anything illegal? Not to her knowledge. "I can't say he ever broke the law," Claire admitted. "He just manipulates situations to his benefit, often at someone else's expense." Vivian exhaled as though deflated. "I see," she murmured. Their teas arrived, and she stirred hers distractedly. "He's pressuring me to sign a prenup that heavily favors him. Something about future earnings based on my father's investments." Claire's eyebrows shot up. "That's a huge red flag." "I know," Vivian said, tears threatening to spill. "He wants me to sign before we set a wedding date. My father sees it as standard business, but I'm not comfortable. And last night, the way he ranted about Julian made me realize I don't even know this man I'm engaged to." A wave of sympathy washed over Claire. Despite her anger at Nathan, she couldn't deny that Vivian was trapped in a toxic dynamic. "You have every right to be cautious," Claire said softly. "Listen, if you need someone to talk to or a place to clear your head, you can call me. I'm not your enemy. Nathan is my past." Vivian bowed her head. "Thank you." I appreciate it." They sipped their tea in pensive silence. After a few minutes, Vivian spoke again. "I'm planning to confront Nathan about postponing the wedding until I feel secure about everything. I'm not sure how he'll react." Claire recalled Nathan's explosive temper when challenged. "Whatever you decide, be safe. Nathan can be vindictive if he feels betrayed. Keep your support system close." Vivian nodded, blinking back tears. "I will. And Claire, I'm sorry about how my father treated Julian. He thinks everyone's after our money, but he was out of line." Claire smiled gently. Apology accepted. They parted ways outside the tea shop, the clouds overhead threatening a downpour. As Vivian walked off, shoulders hunched against the wind, Claire felt a swell of complicated emotions. Pity for Vivian, disgust for Nathan, and a flicker of relief that she'd escaped that life. Yet she also sensed that this conversation would have repercussions. Nathan, feeling cornered, was capable of lashing out in dangerous ways. And Vivian, if she chose to challenge him, could expose a side of Nathan that Claire knew all too well, the side that never forgave or forgot perceived slights. A storm was brewing, one that could upend everyone's lives. Claire woke to a flurry of frantic messages from her best friend, Lena. Blurry-eyed, she switched on the TV to see a breaking news segment. Nathan Hale under investigation for fraud. Just days after his self-important engagement soiree, he was now the target of a high-profile inquiry into alleged financial crimes. Reporters claimed he had falsified records in a corporate merger, exploiting his fiancée's family connections for illegal gains. Claire felt conflicting emotions swirl: shock, vindication, and an odd residual sadness for someone she had once loved. Her phone rang again. Lena breathlessly filled in the details. Vivian's father, Charles Carter, had apparently withdrawn all his support, and rumors suggested Vivian herself had turned over incriminating evidence to investigators. Nathan, faced with potential arrest, was desperate and alone. As Claire mulled over the gossip, an incoming call from an unknown number jolted her. She answered, bracing for whatever came next. "Claire?" Nathan's unmistakable voice rasped. "I'm out of options. They've frozen my accounts and Vivian's gone. You have to help me." His words tumbled in a panicked rush. She could practically hear him pacing, fury mixed with disbelief. "Nathan," she said curtly, "I'm not your wife anymore, and your problems aren't mine. If you forged documents or tricked investors, that's on you." He let out a jagged laugh. "Everyone thinks they know better. All these high society people only care about one thing: winning. I played by their rules, and now I'm the villain. Even you're abandoning me." His tone turned accusatory. "You realize that Julian and his billions won't always be there to clean up your messes." Claire bristled, but kept her voice steady. "My life is no longer entangled with yours. Don't ever call me again." He hung up abruptly, leaving her shaken yet oddly liberated. She realized in that moment that Nathan's downfall brought final closure. She had no lingering sense of responsibility. He was merely a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition, and she was done carrying the burden of his mistakes. 2 days later, Claire's boyfriend, Julian Cross, returned from his business trip in San Francisco. The moment she saw him step off the elevator into his penthouse, relief flooded her. Dropping her handbag, she enveloped him in a tight embrace. He stroked her hair, murmuring how much he'd missed her, before she led him to the sofa. "Julian," she began softly, "while you were away, Nathan's entire world collapsed. He's under investigation. Vivian broke off the engagement, and he's basically begging me for help." Julian's brow furrowed in concern. "He called you directly?" She nodded. "He wants money for a better lawyer." I refused. It felt cruel, but I couldn't let him drag me into his chaos again. Julian exhaled, relief evident. "I'm proud of you for setting boundaries, If you ever feel threatened, I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." They spent the next few hours catching up, discussing the swirl of legal drama and media coverage. Even tabloids took a keen interest, linking Julian's quiet power with Nathan's spectacular ruin. Claire hated the gossip, but Julian reassured her that such rumors would fade. That evening, they attended a charity art auction in support of local artists. As they entered the gallery, photographers snapped pictures of Julian, now fully recognized as one of the city's most generous philanthropists. Claire stiffened momentarily at the attention, but he leaned in, whispering, "Relax, we're here for a good cause." Encouraged by his warmth, she explored the various artworks, eventually falling in love with a vibrant modern piece. Julian outbid everyone else, gifting Claire the painting with a discreet, triumphant smile. Afterward, they hosted a small gathering with close friends in Julian's penthouse to celebrate both Claire's new contract with a boutique hotel chain and the addition of the striking art piece to her design portfolio. Lena arrived, hugging Claire and animatedly recounting the latest on Nathan's investigation, from canceled contracts to outraged investors. While part of Claire felt a sting of pity, she couldn't deny a sense of affirmation that she had done the right thing by leaving him. Later that night, once the guests departed, Claire and Julian sat alone in the softly lit living room. City lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the newly mounted painting. With a glass of wine in her hand, Claire gazed at the skyline and felt a deep current of tranquility. Gone were the days when she doubted her worth because of Nathan's criticisms or endured his backhanded compliments. She turned to Julian, who was watching her with quiet tenderness. "I never thought I'd end up here," she admitted, voice catching in her throat. "A year ago, I was still broken from the divorce. Now, everything feels possible." Julian took her hand and gently kissed her knuckles. "You deserve a partner who sees your brilliance, not someone who tears you down to boost his own ego." A small, wry smile curved his lips. "As for the rest, my money, my connections, I want you to know, I admire your independence. I'm here to support you, but you've already proved you can stand on your own." His words filled her with a warmth that chased away any lingering insecurity. Together, they stepped up to the wide window. The city spread out below like an endless tapestry of light. Claire leaned her head on Julian's shoulder, recalling the battered woman she had been, overshadowed by Nathan's demands, made to feel less than enough. She had reclaimed her life, rediscovered her passion for architecture, and opened her heart to a man who honored her dreams rather than stifled them. Down on the streets, the bright chaos of New York pulsed, uncaring of one man's downfall or another's triumph. Yet in that still, intimate moment, Claire felt renewed, freed from her past, and embracing a future that shone with possibility. Nathan's downfall made headlines, but Claire had already moved on, hand in hand with a man who valued her strength, not her past. Her journey from heartbreak to healing proves that even when love turns toxic, we can rise wiser, stronger, and more whole. She didn't seek revenge. She simply chose peace, growth, and a future she truly deserved. If this story moved you, tap that like button and share it with someone who loves a good redemption arc. Don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories of love, loss, and new beginnings. Thanks for watching.
The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of money and ambition, a perfume Ethan Hayes had worn his entire life. He stood at the center of it all, a king in his castle, until he saw her. A ghost from a life he'd long since buried. Clara, his ex-wife, the woman his family had dismissed as wallpaper, now floated across the marble floor in a gown the color of midnight, her hand resting on the arm of Sebastian Croft, a man whose net worth could purchase Ethan's entire legacy 10 times over. And in that moment, Ethan's perfectly curated world began to shatter. The annual St. Jude's Foundation Gala was the apex of the Chicago social season, a glittering affair where old money and new tech collided under the weight of $1,000-a-plate charity. Ethan Hayes moved through the crowd with an easy, practiced grace, his hand resting possessively on the small of his girlfriend's back. A smile was fixed on his face, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes but was perfect for press photos. He was a Hayes, after all, and their public image was as meticulously managed as their stock portfolio. His mother, Margaret, was holding court near the silent auction, her silver hair a beacon of aristocratic judgment. Everything was as it should be, and then the world tilted on its axis. The grand doors of the Drake Hotel's ballroom swung open, and a hush fell over the room, a ripple of collective awe that Ethan felt in his bones before he even saw the cause. A woman stood silhouetted against the light of the hallway, a vision in a sapphire silk gown that clung to her figure like a second skin. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing the graceful line of her neck and a constellation of diamonds that glittered with every subtle movement. But it wasn't the dress or the diamonds that made Ethan's breath catch in his throat. It was her face. It was Clara. His Clara. No, not his. Not for a long, long time. The woman he saw now was a stranger sculpted from familiar clay. The quiet, accommodating girl he had married and his family had systematically erased was gone. In her place was a woman of unnerving poise and confidence. Her eyes, once perpetually downcast, now scanned the room with a cool, appraising gaze. The hesitant smile he remembered was replaced by a serene, almost challenging curve of her lips. Beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm, was Sebastian Croft. The Sebastian Croft. A titan of industry, a recluse who rarely graced these events, a man whose name was whispered in boardrooms with a mixture of fear and reverence. His presence was a gravitational force, pulling the attention of every power player in the room, and he was looking at Clara not as an accessory, but as the center of his universe. Ethan felt a cold dread snake up his spine. He could feel the whispers start, the furtive glances in his direction. He was suddenly aware of his girlfriend, Tiffany, chattering beside him, her words dissolving into meaningless noise. His mother's sharp gaze found his from across the room, her perfectly arched eyebrows knitting together in a rare display of confusion. "Ethan, darling, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost," Tiffany said, her voice grating on his raw nerves. He couldn't answer. He was mesmerized, watching Clara and Sebastian move into the room. They didn't walk, they glided. People parted for them, drawn to their aura of power. Sebastian bent his head to murmur something in Clara's ear, and she laughed. It was a sound Ethan had forgotten, a low, melodic chime that now sent a shard of ice through his heart. He realized with a sickening jolt that he hadn't heard her laugh like that in years, not even in the beginning. His mind reeled, trying to reconcile the image before him with the woman he had let walk out of his life 5 years ago with a single suitcase and a check he'd considered generous. The Clara he knew was a mouse, a lovely, timid creature who arranged his flowers, organized his social calendar, and absorbed his family's endless slights with a quiet, heartbreaking resilience. She was the background to his life, the comfortable, predictable wallpaper he hadn't truly noticed until it was stripped away. And now, this. This was not wallpaper. This was a masterpiece, unveiled for the world to see, and he felt a primal, illogical surge of possession. How? How had the girl who was too shy to speak at his family's dinner parties become this formidable woman on the arm of a billionaire? Where had this confidence, this elegance, this power come from? As if sensing his stare, Clara's gaze swept across the room and locked with his. For a heartbeat, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Her serene expression didn't falter, but he saw a flicker in the depths of her dark eyes, a spark of something he couldn't name. It wasn't hatred or sadness or even recognition. It was something far more chilling, indifference. It was the look you give a stranger, a piece of furniture, a part of the scenery you have no interest in. In that single, dismissive glance, Ethan Hayes, the man who had everything, felt a profound and terrifying sense of loss. He had not just lost a wife he'd never valued. He had lost a story he never bothered to read. And now he was seeing the stunning final chapter, realizing with horror that he was nothing more than a footnote in the preface. The ghost he was seeing wasn't just Clara. It was the ghost of the man he could have been and the life he had so carelessly thrown away. The memory haunted Ethan now, rising unbidden like smoke from the ashes of his past. It was their third Christmas as a married couple, and the Hayes family had gathered at the sprawling ancestral home in Lake Forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and his mother's expensive perfume. Clara, then only 24, had spent a week meticulously planning her contribution to the family's potluck-style Christmas Eve dinner, a tradition Margaret Hayes insisted upon to maintain a facade of humility. Clara had decided on a beef Wellington, a complex, ambitious dish she'd practiced for weeks. Ethan remembered her in their city apartment kitchen, her brow furrowed in concentration, flour dusting her cheek. She was so desperate to impress them, so eager to finally carve out a small space for herself within the impenetrable fortress of the Hayes clan. She had even purchased a new dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant forest green velvet that brought out the warmth in her eyes. When they arrived, the condescension began immediately. His Aunt Carol, a woman with a face perpetually pinched in disapproval, eyed the ornate pastry. "Oh, how ambitious, dear. Let's hope it's not too dry. Ethan needs his food just so." Clara's smile tightened, but she placed it on the sideboard with the other dishes. Later, during dinner, Ethan watched as his family heaped their plates with the caterer-provided turkey and the ham his mother had ordered from a specialty shop. Clara's beef Wellington sat largely untouched. He saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes as his father, a man of few words and even fewer compliments, cut a small piece, chewed it thoughtfully, and then declared, "A bit rich for my blood." No one else tried it. Ethan, caught between a lifetime of placating his family and the silent plea in his wife's eyes, did nothing. He said nothing. He ate the turkey. He remembered the exact moment he made the choice, a small, cowardly betrayal that felt insignificant at the time, but now loomed large in his memory. He saw Clara trying to engage his cousin in conversation, only to be spoken over. He saw her offering to help his mother in the kitchen, only to be waved away with a dismissive, "Oh, the staff will handle it, dear. You just sit." The final crushing blow came during the gift exchange. Clara had spent months searching for the perfect presents. A rare first-edition book for his father, a history buff. A vintage silk scarf from a Parisian boutique for his mother. She had put so much thought, so much of her limited allowance, into each gift. His family opened them with polite, lukewarm smiles before turning their attention to the more extravagant offerings. In return, they had all chipped in to get her a single gift, a high-end vacuum cleaner. "We just noticed you're so domestic," his mother had said, her smile a razor blade cloaked in velvet. "We thought it would be useful for you." The room had filled with a tense silence. It was a joke, but it wasn't. It was a statement. It was a branding iron, marking her as the help, the outsider, the girl who would never truly belong. Ethan saw the color drain from Clara's face. He saw the fight she was having with herself, the battle to keep the tears at bay, to maintain her composure in a room full of people who saw her as nothing more than an accessory to their son. And again, he did nothing. He laughed along, a hollow, shallow sound. He told her later, in the car on the way home, that it was just his mother's way. He told her not to be so sensitive. He didn't see the single tear that slipped down her cheek in the darkness of the car. He didn't understand that with every slice of untouched beef Wellington, every dismissive comment, every thoughtless gift, they were carving away pieces of her soul. Their marriage hadn't ended in a fiery explosion. It had died a slow, quiet death by 1,000 cuts. He had been so immersed in his own world, the world of Hayes Industries, of boardrooms and business trips, that he hadn't noticed she was suffocating. He saw her as a constant, a given, the steady, reliable presence that managed his home, soothed his ego, and asked for so little in return. Her needs were whispers in the roaring wind of his ambition. He remembered their final conversation. It wasn't a fight. She had packed a single bag. She sat him down in their pristine living room, the one she had decorated but never seemed to truly inhabit. Her voice was calm, devoid of the emotion he had expected. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," she'd said, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Do what? What's wrong? Is it my mother? I'll talk to her." The offer was empty, and they both knew it. She shook her head, a sad, knowing smile on her face. "It's not just her. It's me. I don't know who I am anymore. I look in the mirror, and I see a ghost, a faint outline of a person. I need to find out if there's anything real left underneath." He had tried to argue, to offer solutions, a vacation, a new car, a bigger allowance. He treated it like a business negotiation, a problem to be solved with money. He didn't understand that she was talking about her very existence. He couldn't comprehend that the quiet, compliant woman he had married had found a core of steel within her, forged in the fires of his family's indifference and his own neglect. When she walked out the door, he felt a brief pang of annoyance, of inconvenience. He never imagined it was the last time he would see her as a broken thing. The ash of that past was now coating his tongue, bitter and choking, as he stood in the ballroom watching the phoenix who had risen from it. The first 6 months after leaving Ethan were a brutal, monochrome existence. The generous check he'd given her, the one meant to assuage his guilt and keep her quiet, sat untouched in a new bank account she opened with her maiden name, Clara Stevens. She was determined not to use a single cent of it. That money was tainted with pity and dismissal. Using it would feel like an admission that she couldn't survive without him. She rented a small one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, a world away from the opulent Lincoln Park mansion she'd left behind. The anonymity was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in years, no one knew her as Ethan Hayes's wife. No one had any expectations of her. She was just Clara, a woman trying to figure out how to pay her next utility bill. She had a degree in art history, a passion that the Hayes family had deemed a lovely little hobby. It was hardly a marketable skill in a competitive job market. She took a job at a small art gallery, a position she was wildly overqualified for, but it paid the rent. She was the one who answered the phones, managed the inventory, and served cheap white wine at openings. It was humbling, soul-crushing work at times. She endured condescending patrons and the pitying looks of her boss, who knew just enough about her past to treat her like a fragile, tragic figure. But in the quiet moments, surrounded by art, she felt a flicker of the person she used to be. She would lose herself in the brushstrokes of a painting, in the bold lines of a sculpture, and remember the girl who had dreams before they were suffocated by the Hayes name. It was during one of these gallery openings, about a year into her new life, that she met Sebastian Croft. He hadn't come for the art. He was there to meet a client, and the gallery was simply a neutral, public space. He was a commanding presence, dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than her car, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were intelligent, observant, and missed nothing. She was in the back, struggling to open a case of wine, when he appeared. "Let me help you with that," he said, his voice a low baritone. He took the box cutter from her hand and sliced through the tape with an effortless precision. "Thank you," she said, flustered. "You seem to know your way around this collection," he observed, gesturing to the paintings on the wall. "The artist is talented but lacks discipline. His composition is derivative of Richter but without the emotional depth." Clara was taken aback. No one ever talked to her about the art. "I agree," she found herself saying, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. He's technically proficient, but there's no soul. It's imitation, not inspiration. A flicker of genuine interest crossed Sebastian's face. You have a good eye. They spent the next 20 minutes locked in a deep, engaging conversation about art, a conversation more intellectually stimulating than any she'd had in 5 years of marriage. He didn't ask her who she was or what she did. He just listened to her ideas. At the end of the night, he handed her his card. I run an investment firm, he said. Croft Ventures. We have a small but growing division that invests in emerging artists and art tech startups. I think you'd be an asset. Call my office tomorrow. Clara was stunned. She thought it was a line, a polite dismissal, but something in his direct, no-nonsense gaze told her it was a genuine offer. The next day, on a whim, she called. She was put through to him immediately. He offered her a job as a junior analyst in his art investment division. The pay was more than double what she was making at the gallery. It was the lifeline she didn't know she was searching for. Working for Sebastian was demanding. He was a ruthless businessman, but he was also a brilliant mentor. He saw the sharp, analytical mind that had been buried under years of social niceties. He pushed her, challenged her, and never once treated her as fragile. He gave her projects that forced her to grow, to learn the language of finance, of acquisitions and market trends. She devoured it all. She worked harder than she ever had in her life, fueled by a desperate need to prove not just to him, but to herself, that she was more than a pretty face who could arrange flowers. She discovered she had a talent for it. Her art history background gave her a unique ability to spot talent, to see the potential in an unknown artist before they hit the mainstream. Her quiet, observant nature made her a shrewd negotiator. She was building something, a career, a reputation, a new identity forged in her own fire. Her relationship with Sebastian evolved slowly, organically. It started with late nights working in the office, fueled by coffee and a shared passion for their work. It grew into dinners where they debated market strategies and art theory. He was the first person who saw her, the intelligent, capable woman she was fighting to become. He wasn't saving a damsel in distress. He was investing in a high-potential asset, and the return was more than he could have imagined. The romance came later, a quiet understanding that blossomed between two people who respected each other's minds as much as their hearts. He knew about Ethan. She had told him everything, not as a sob story, but as a statement of fact, a history she had overcome. He listened without judgment, his jaw tight with a quiet anger on her behalf. One evening, standing on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the city, he had taken her hand. "The past is a lesson, not a life sentence, Clara," he'd said, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "You've built this new life yourself. I just opened a door. You were the one brave enough to walk through it." And she knew he was right. Standing in the ballroom at the St. Jude's Gala, with Sebastian's steady presence beside her, she wasn't hiding behind his power or his wealth. She was standing on a foundation she had built from the ground up. One grueling day, one smart decision, one hard-won victory at a time. She was the architect of her own life, and she was finally ready to survey her creation. The days following the gala were a slow-motion nightmare for Ethan. Clara's image was seared into his mind. Her cool indifference, the proprietary way Sebastian Croft's hand rested on her arm, the collective gasp of a room that had once considered her invisible. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't focus. During a crucial board meeting about a potential merger, he found himself staring out the window, replaying that one dismissive glance over and over. His world, once so solid and predictable, now felt like quicksand. He snapped at his assistant, was curt with his girlfriend, and avoided his mother's calls, knowing they would be filled with a venomous curiosity he didn't have the energy to face. He was consumed. He did what he always did when faced with a problem he couldn't solve. He threw money and resources at it. He hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Peterson who specialized in sensitive corporate and personal inquiries. The request felt shameful. a violation of a past he had no right to anymore, but the need to know was a gnawing hunger that overshadowed his pride. "I want to know everything," Ethan told Peterson in his sterile corner office overlooking the Chicago River. "How she met him, what she does for him, everything." The first report came back within 48 hours, and it was a gut punch. Peterson had compiled a detailed dossier on Clara Stevens. The name itself was a small sting. She had shed his name like a skin she no longer wanted. The report detailed her professional rise within Croft Ventures. It spoke of her uncanny eye for talent and her reputation as a formidable negotiator. It included quotes from art world publications that praised her recent acquisitions for the Croft collection, calling her one of the most influential new players in the contemporary art market. This wasn't a woman being kept by a billionaire. This was a woman who had built an empire alongside him. Ethan read the words, asset, influential, formidable, and they didn't compute. They were describing a stranger. How had he missed this? How could a person with this much potential have lived in his house, slept in his bed, without him ever seeing a hint of it? The realization was a cold, creeping horror. He hadn't just ignored her. He had been blind. He had looked at her and seen only what he wanted to see, what his family wanted him to see. A beautiful, placid, and ultimately unimportant addition to his life. His interactions with his family became strained. His mother, Margaret, finally cornered him at their regular Sunday brunch. "I cannot believe the audacity of that girl," she began, her fork clicking against her plate. "To show up like that, flaunting that man, it's utterly tasteless. What does a man like Sebastian Croft even see in her?" The question hung in the air, and for the first time, Ethan heard the desperate insecurity beneath his mother's bluster. She wasn't just insulting Clara, she was trying to reinforce her own worldview, a world where people stayed in the neat little boxes she assigned them. "Maybe he sees what we never bothered to look for," Ethan said, the words tasting like acid. Margaret's eyes widened in shock. "What is that supposed to mean? We gave her everything, a beautiful home, a place in society." "We gave her a cage, Mother," Ethan shot back, his voice rising. "A beautiful gilded cage. We treated her like a pet, not a partner. That vacuum cleaner at Christmas? Did you have any idea how cruel that was?" The memory, once so distant, was now vivid and shameful. He saw the scene through Clara's eyes, the forced smile, the public humiliation. His mother was momentarily speechless, a rare occurrence. She saw the rebellion in her son's eyes, the first cracks in the perfect facade of the heir she had so carefully molded. The unraveling continued at home. Tiffany, his girlfriend, was a carbon copy of what his mother thought he needed. Beautiful, socially adept, and utterly uncomplicated. But now her cheerful, surface-level conversations felt gratingly empty. Her talk of parties and shopping and gossip seemed trivial, infantile, compared to the woman he now knew Clara had become. One evening, as Tiffany was showing him a new pair of diamond earrings she'd bought, he found himself staring at her, a strange sense of detachment washing over him. "Were you ever passionate about anything, Tiff?" he asked abruptly. "Besides this?" He gestured vaguely at the opulent room, the glittering jewelry. She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean, I'm passionate about us?" The answer, which once would have satisfied him, now felt hollow. He realized he didn't know the first thing about the woman he was dating, and he didn't care to learn. He had been living a life of curated surfaces, and Clara's return had smashed the mirror, forcing him to see the profound emptiness behind it. He was surrounded by wealth, by beauty, by success, but he was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The power he had always taken for granted, the power of his name and his money, felt like a useless weapon against the quiet strength of a woman he had thrown away. He had been the king of a hollow kingdom, and he was only just beginning to understand the true cost of his crown. It took Ethan a week to build up the courage to reach out. Every draft of the text message he wrote sounded either pathetic or demanding. He finally settled on something simple, something that feigned a professionalism he was far from feeling. "Clara, it's Ethan. I was surprised to see you at the gala. I was hoping we could talk. There are some loose ends from the old endowment fund we started that I'd like to discuss." It was a lie, a flimsy pretext, and he knew she would see right through it. But it was the only way he could frame the request without admitting the truth, that he was haunted by her and desperate for answers. Her reply came 2 hours later, cool and concise. "Ethan, a conversation is fine. My assistant will be in touch to schedule a time." He felt a strange mix of relief and humiliation. She was treating him like a business associate, a minor appointment to be slotted into her busy calendar. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely inverted. Her assistant scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at 3 o'clock. The location she chose was the cafe at the Art Institute of Chicago. It was a masterstroke of strategy on her part. It was public, yet discreet. And it was her territory, a place where she was the expert and he was the novice. When he arrived, she was already there, sitting at a small table overlooking the museum's serene south garden. She was wearing a simple, tailored, cream-colored dress, her hair pulled back, her face framed by minimalist gold earrings. She looked elegant, professional, and completely untouchable. She was sipping an espresso, a notebook and pen resting on the table beside her. She wasn't waiting for him. She was working while she waited. "Ethan," she said, her voice even as he approached. She didn't stand up. "Thank you for coming." "Clara," he managed, his own voice sounding rough to his ears. "You look... well." It was the most inadequate word he could have chosen. She didn't look well. She looked magnificent. "I am," she replied, her gaze direct, unwavering. There was no trace of the nervous, deferential woman who used to shrink under his gaze. "You mentioned the endowment fund?" He flinched at the directness of her question, the way she immediately dispensed with pleasantries and cut to his fabricated agenda. "Right, the fund. It was just some paperwork." He let the lie die on his lips. It was pointless. "There is no paperwork, Ethan," she said, not unkindly, but with a finality that left no room for argument. "Our lawyers dissolved that trust 4 years ago. Why did you want to see me?" Stripped of his pretense, he felt a wave of raw, unfamiliar vulnerability. He sat down, his movements stiff. I don't know," he admitted, the honesty feeling foreign on his tongue. "I was shocked to see you. I needed to understand." "Understand what?" she asked, her voice a calm, curious whisper. "What is it you think you're owed an understanding of?" The question was a surgeon's scalpel, cutting away his ego and exposing the entitlement beneath. He had always believed he was owed an explanation, a place in her story. "How did this happen?" he finally asked, gesturing vaguely. "You and Sebastian Croft, your work, everything." Clara took a slow sip of her espresso, her eyes never leaving his. "It happened because I left, Ethan. It happened because for the first time in my life, I was forced to rely on myself. I didn't have the Hayes name to hide behind or be crushed by. I had to build something of my own, or I would have disappeared entirely." There was no bitterness in her voice, only a profound, unshakable clarity. "You and your family," she continued, "you saw me as a project, a girl from a modest background who needed to be polished, to be molded into the perfect corporate wife. You never once stopped to ask who I was or what I wanted. You just assumed I wanted what you had." Every word was true, and the truth was a physical blow. He had been so proud of giving her a better life, never realizing he was stealing her own. "I didn't see it," he whispered, the admission costing him more than any failed business deal ever had. "I was a fool." "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "You weren't a fool. You were a product of your environment. You were a Hayes. And being a Hayes means you never have to look too closely at the people you consider beneath you. It's a privilege you're born with." She paused, her gaze softening for just a moment. "The real tragedy, Ethan, is that you were never interested in who I was. You were interested in the idea of me, the quiet, supportive wife who would make your life easier. And when I stopped being easy, I stopped being useful." He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he couldn't. She had dissected their entire marriage with a precision that was both brilliant and devastating. He had no defense. "Is he good to you?" he asked, the question feeling small and petty, but he needed to know. A genuine smile finally touched her lips. "Sebastian doesn't see me as an extension of himself," she said. "He sees me as a partner. He challenges me. He respects me, and he celebrates my successes as if they were his own. He's good to me because he sees me, all of me." It was the final, crushing blow. That was what he had failed to do. He had never truly seen her. He had looked, but he had never seen. She glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting at 4, she said, gathering her things. There was no malice in her dismissal, just the practicality of a busy woman with a schedule to keep. As she stood to leave, he felt a surge of desperation. "Clara, wait. I'm sorry." She paused and looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "I know, Ethan," she said softly, "but you're not sorry for what you did to me. You're sorry for what you lost. There's a difference." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone at the table, surrounded by masterpieces he couldn't see, the echo of her words branding themselves onto his soul. She hadn't come for revenge. She had come for something far more powerful, to show him the truth, and then to leave him with it. Life with Sebastian was a world away from her life with Ethan. It was a partnership forged in the crucible of ambition and mutual respect. Their evenings were spent not at stuffy society dinners, but in their shared home office, poring over auction catalogues, or in deep debate over the merits of a new artist they were considering for the Croft collection. Sebastian valued her opinion, sought her counsel, and treated her success as integral to his own. For the first time, Clara felt like an equal, a true partner. But even in this seemingly perfect world, she began to notice subtle, disquieting cracks. Sebastian was a man who craved control. It was what made him a brilliant businessman, able to anticipate market shifts and orchestrate complex, multi-billion-dollar deals with a chess master's foresight. But this need for control sometimes bled into their personal life in ways that pricked at Clara's newfound independence. It started small. He would override her choice of restaurant for dinner, insisting he knew a better place. He'd surprise her with a weekend trip, leaving no room for her to object, framing his unilateral decision-making as a romantic gesture. She tried to dismiss it as him being protective, a stark contrast to Ethan's neglect. But a persistent, uneasy feeling began to take root. The first major fissure appeared during a deal involving a small independent art gallery in Pilsen, a vibrant, predominantly Hispanic neighborhood in Chicago. The gallery, Galleria Sombra, was a community hub, a place that nurtured local, emerging Latino artists who were often ignored by the mainstream art world. Clara had discovered it on her own, spending weekends visiting smaller venues, and had fallen in love with its raw, authentic energy. She saw immense, untapped potential. She proposed an acquisition to Sebastian, not a hostile takeover, but a partnership. Croft Ventures would provide funding, resources, and a global platform, while the gallery's founder, a passionate woman named Elena, would retain creative control. It was a perfect blend of their corporate mission and Clara's desire to support authentic, diverse voices. Sebastian initially loved the idea, but as they got deeper into the negotiations, his controlling nature began to surface. He wanted to rebrand the gallery, change its name to Croft Annex Pilsen. He wanted to install his own director, arguing that Elena lacked the corporate experience to manage their investment properly. "We need to protect our interests, Clara," he argued one night, standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city lights glittered below them like a conquered territory. "Passion doesn't guarantee profit. We need structure. We need our people on the inside." "You're missing the point, Sebastian," Clara countered, her voice firm. "The gallery's magic is Elena. It's the community trust she's built. If you sanitize it, if you turn it into another corporate outpost, you'll kill the very thing we're trying to invest in. It will lose its soul." "Souls don't show up on a balance sheet," he retorted, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard it. "This is business." The argument escalated, their first real fight. It wasn't about the gallery anymore. It was about control. Clara realized that Sebastian, for all his support, still saw her vision as something to be managed, to be molded to fit his own rigid framework. He had helped her build her wings, but now he was subtly trying to direct her flight path. A few days later, she discovered he had gone behind her back. He had sent one of his lawyers to speak with Elena directly, presenting a revised, more aggressive offer that sidelined her and essentially demoted her to a curatorial consultant in her own gallery. Elena, feeling bullied and betrayed, called Clara, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. The sense of betrayal was sharp and sickeningly familiar. Clara confronted Sebastian, her heart pounding with a cold fury. "You went behind my back," she said, her voice low and steady. "You used my idea, my connection with Elena, and you tried to strong-arm her. That's not a partnership. That's a conquest." Sebastian had the grace to look chagrined, but he didn't back down. "I made a business decision, Clara. I did what I thought was best for the company." "For your company," she corrected him. "Was there ever a point where you were going to treat me as a full partner in this, or am I just your most successful acquisition?" The question hung between them, ugly and undeniable. The look on his face was a complex mixture of shock, hurt, and a dawning, uncomfortable recognition. He had championed her. He had celebrated her, but he had never truly relinquished control. He had freed her from one gilded cage, only to subtly construct another around her. One of gratitude, of professional obligation, of a love that was intertwined with possession. She saw it clearly then. Her journey wasn't over. Escaping Ethan and the Hayes family was only the first step. The ultimate test was not just to gain power, but to learn how to wield it on her own terms, to stand fully in her own light without being eclipsed by the shadow of a powerful man, no matter how much she loved him. She had fought to find her voice, and she would not allow it to be ventriloquized, not even by the man who had helped her discover it. The choice was stark. She could be a queen in his empire, or she could be the sovereign of her own. Ethan's confrontation with his mother at Sunday brunch was the first tremor in what would become a seismic event for the Hayes family. His newfound clarity about their treatment of Clara acted as a lens, bringing the family's other dysfunctions into sharp, painful focus. He started noticing things he'd been conditioned to ignore, the way his mother subtly manipulated his father, the casual cruelty in his aunt's gossip, the suffocating pressure on everyone to maintain the illusion of flawless old money perfection. The real implosion began, as most Hayes family disasters did, with money. The merger that Ethan had been distracted from during the days after the gala was a crucial deal for Hayes Industries. It was a merger with a rapidly growing green energy company designed to pivot the century-old manufacturing firm toward a more sustainable and profitable future. Ethan had been leading the negotiations, but his heart wasn't in it. His mind was elsewhere, lost in a sea of regret. What he didn't know was that Sebastian Croft was also circling the same green energy company. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, sending shockwaves through the Chicago business community. Croft Ventures had made a surprise, all-cash offer for the company, an offer so aggressive and inflated that it completely obliterated the Hayes Industries proposal. It was a hostile takeover, executed with surgical precision. The board of the energy company, faced with an offer that would enrich them beyond their wildest dreams, accepted within hours. The merger wasn't just dead, it had been publicly assassinated. Ethan was in his office when his father, a man he hadn't seen truly angry in decades, stormed in, his face a mottled, furious red. "What the hell happened, Ethan?" he roared, slamming a copy of the Wall Street Journal onto his son's desk. The headline screamed, "Croft snatches green tech jewel in bold power play." I don't know, Ethan stammered. Our offer was solid. This came out of nowhere. Out of nowhere? His father scoffed. This is what happens when you lose focus. Your mother tells me you've been moping around for weeks, obsessed with that girl. Is this her? Is this some kind of revenge? The accusation struck Ethan like a physical blow. Would Clara do this? Would she use Sebastian's power to destroy his family's legacy? The woman he had spoken to at the Art Institute seemed above such petty revenge. But the timing was too perfect, too devastating to be a coincidence. The fallout was immediate. Hayes Industries' stock plummeted. The media portrayed them as a lumbering dinosaur, outmaneuvered by a more agile and ruthless predator. The failure of the merger exposed other deeper financial weaknesses within the company, cracks that had been papered over for years by Margaret's iron-fisted control of their public image. The family gathered for an emergency meeting at the Lake Forest estate. The atmosphere was funereal. His father was grimly silent, his Aunt Carol was weeping softly, and his mother was livid. Her rage was not directed at Sebastian Croft, but at the one person she could blame, the outsider who had disrupted their perfect world. "This is all her fault," Margaret hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "That manipulative little social climber. She got her claws into that man and convinced him to ruin us. She was never anything but trouble." "Stop it, Mother," Ethan said, his voice weary. "You have no proof of that." "I don't need proof," she shrieked. "I knew from the day you brought her home she was a parasite. I tried to warn you." "You tried to break her," Ethan corrected, his own anger finally igniting. "You treated her like dirt because she wasn't from our world. You belittled her, you insulted her, you made her feel worthless. And you know what? You succeeded. She left, broken. And now she's come back strong, and you can't stand it. This isn't about the company. This is about your pride. You're angry because the woman you dismissed as insignificant is now infinitely more powerful than you are." The truth of his words hung in the opulent drawing room, sucking the air out of the space. His father looked at him, then at Margaret, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He had always deferred to his wife in social matters, but the loss of the deal, the threat to their legacy, had shaken him to his core. The final detonation came from an unexpected source. Ethan's younger sister, who had always been a quiet observer, finally spoke up. "He's right, Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We were awful to Clara, all of us, and this mess with the company. Dad, you know we've been leveraged to the hilt for years. This deal was a Hail Mary. It's not Clara's fault, the foundation was already rotten." The confession, the first crack in the family's united front of denial, shattered the remaining illusion. The argument that followed was ugly and brutal, a Pandora's box of resentments and long-buried truths flying open. Accusations were hurled, secrets were exposed. Margaret's carefully constructed image as the perfect matriarch, the unshakable leader of the Hayes clan, crumbled to dust in a matter of minutes. Ethan watched the implosion with a strange sense of detachment. He was witnessing the end of an era, the collapse of a dynasty built on a foundation of arrogance, denial, and cruelty, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that they had brought it all upon themselves. Clara wasn't the cause of their downfall. She was merely the mirror that had been held up to them, forcing them to finally see the ugly, decaying truth of who they had become. In the smouldering wreckage of his family's company and reputation, Ethan Hayes finally hit rock bottom. The family was fractured, communicating only through lawyers. His father was a ghost, wandering the empty halls of Hayes Industries, while his mother had retreated into a bitter, self-imposed exile, refusing to see anyone. The empire was gone, and so was the arrogance that had fueled it. For the first time in his life, Ethan was truly alone with his failures. He spent weeks sifting through the debris of his past, replaying memories, not just of Clara, but of his entire life. He saw a man who had glided through the world on a wave of privilege, a man who had never been challenged, who had never known true adversity, and who had never, ever been forced to take a hard look at himself. The man he saw in the mirror now was a stranger, humbled, broken, and filled with a profound, aching regret. He knew he had to see Clara one last time, not to beg for her back, not to ask for forgiveness he hadn't earned, but simply to say the words he should have said years ago. It wasn't about absolution for him, it was about acknowledgement for her. He didn't go through her assistant this time. Through a contact, he found out about a small, independent gallery she was supporting, the very one that had caused the rift between her and Sebastian. He went there on a rainy Thursday afternoon, knowing she often visited to mentor the young artists. He found her in a quiet corner, speaking with a young painter, her expression one of genuine warmth and encouragement. She was dressed down in jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, yet she seemed more luminous than she had in her gala gown. When she saw him, her smile didn't vanish, but it became guarded. She politely excused herself from the artist and walked toward him. "Ethan," she said, her voice neutral, "this is a surprise." "I know," he said, his hands shoved into the pockets of his coat. He felt like an awkward teenager. I needed to say something. In person." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by vibrant, challenging art. "The deal," he began, his voice raspy. "With the Green Energy Company. Was that you?" Clara looked him directly in the eye. "Sebastian acted on his own," she said, her voice clear and steady. "He saw a business opportunity and he took it. When I found out you were the competing offer, I tried to stop him. We had the biggest fight of our relationship over it. I told him I wouldn't be a weapon in his corporate arsenal, and I wouldn't have my past used as a tool for his ambition." She paused. "I'm no longer with Croft Ventures, Ethan, and I'm no longer with Sebastian." The confession stunned him into silence. She had walked away from it all. The power, the money, the man who had helped her rebuild her life. She had chosen herself. "This gallery," she continued, gesturing to the art around them, "this is my first project on my own. I'm using my own money to fund it, the money you gave me when I left. I'm investing it in people I believe in. It's not an empire, but it's mine." He was speechless. The narrative he had constructed of her as a vengeful goddess crumbled, replaced by an image of a woman of unshakable integrity. "That's not why I came," he finally said, finding his voice. "I came to apologize, and not the way I did before. I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about my family, about that Christmas with the vacuum cleaner." He saw a flicker of the old pain in her eyes, and it spurred him on. "We were cruel to you," he said, the words raw and honest. "We didn't see you, Clara. I didn't see you. I was a coward. I was so afraid of disappointing my parents, of rocking the boat, that I stood by and watched them slowly erase you. I let them do it. I chose them over you, every single time. There is no excuse for it. And I am so sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm sorry for the man I was. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you deserved." Tears welled in his eyes, hot and shameful, but he didn't wipe them away. He let her see his brokenness, his complete and utter remorse. Clara watched him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment she said nothing. The only sound was the gentle patter of rain against the gallery windows. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, and her voice was soft, laced with a complex mix of past sorrow and present peace. That means more than you know. It's the one thing I think I always needed to hear." She didn't say, "I forgive you." She didn't have to. The air between them had shifted. The heavy weight of years of unspoken pain had lifted, replaced by a clean, quiet stillness. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Try to build something real, I guess. Something of my own, something I can be proud of." She gave him a small, sad smile. It was a smile of closure, of two people who had shared a life, who had hurt each other deeply, and who could now finally, truly let each other go. His redemption wasn't in getting her back. It was in the painful, necessary act of becoming a man worthy of her memory, a man who could finally understand the value of everything he had lost. The months that followed were a study in quiet reconstruction. For Clara, breaking away from Sebastian was a painful but necessary amputation. She had loved him, and a part of her always would, for he had been the catalyst for her transformation. But she recognized that their relationship, born from a power imbalance, could never be one of true equals. His desire to protect her had morphed into a desire to possess her, and she had fought too hard for her freedom to hand it over to anyone, no matter how benevolent the warden. She poured all her energy and the settlement from her divorce into her new venture, the Stevens Foundation for the Arts. It wasn't as glamorous as Croft Ventures, but it was wholly hers. Her mission was to find the artists who existed in the margins, the ones overlooked by the big galleries and corporate collectors. She traveled, not to Paris and London, but to Detroit, to New Orleans, to small towns in the Southwest, searching for raw, authentic talent. She wasn't just investing money, she was investing belief. She became a mentor, a champion, a force for change in a world that had once deemed her invisible. She found her purpose not in acquiring masterpieces, but in nurturing the masters of tomorrow. Her life was her own, her future a blank canvas, and for the first time she was the only artist with a brush in her hand. For Ethan, the path was steeper and far less certain. The collapse of Hayes Industries was absolute. He and his father were forced to sell off the company's assets piece by piece to cover the mountains of debt. The Lake Forest estate was sold, the glittering facade of their dynasty dismantled. What was left was a modest, manageable sum, enough to live on, but not enough to reclaim their former glory. The loss of wealth, however, was secondary to the loss of identity. Without the Hayes name to define him, Ethan was forced to figure out who he actually was. He started small. He took a business course at a local university, sitting alongside students half his age. It was humbling. He got a job, not as a CEO, but as a consultant for a small, struggling non-profit that helped ex-convicts find employment. It was difficult, often frustrating work, but it was real. He was helping people build new foundations, just as he was trying to build his own. He saw his father occasionally. The anger between them had faded, replaced by a shared, quiet grief for what they had lost, and a tentative hope for what they might rebuild, not a company, but a relationship. His mother remained distant, unable to forgive the world for her fall from grace. Ethan mourned the mother he wished he'd had, but he accepted the one he did. About a year after their last meeting, he was walking through Pilsen on a crisp autumn day and found himself outside Galleria Sombra. The name hadn't been changed. A vibrant mural decorated its exterior wall, and the sound of music and laughter spilled out onto the street. On a plaque near the door it read, "Supported by the Stevens Foundation." He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. He didn't go in. He knew it wasn't his place. That world belonged to her. He felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet gratitude for the woman who had, by leaving him, inadvertently saved him from the hollow man he was destined to become. Their paths would likely never cross in a meaningful way again. Their story was over. But in the quiet, unwritten chapters of their separate futures, they carried the lessons of their shared past. Clara found her power not in the arms of a billionaire, but in the strength of her own convictions. And Ethan, stripped of his name and his fortune, began the slow, arduous journey of finding his own worth, not in a balance sheet, but in the quiet dignity of a life rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and humility. The ending wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. It was something far more real and resonant, a future unwritten, holding the quiet promise of redemption. From the ashes of a forgotten past, a woman's incredible journey of self-discovery proves that the greatest power isn't wealth or revenge, but the courage to reclaim your own story. Clara and Ethan's story is a raw and emotional look at betrayal, the silent struggles we endure, and the difficult path to redemption. It reminds us that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you truly are. If their powerful transformation moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and stir the soul. What did you think of Clara's ultimate choice? Let us know in the comments below.